We have Eyad Said, who is going to talk about surviving a dictator surviving. I am Dimi Doreska. I'm a board member of the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council, and I want to welcome all of you to this program. Thank you for joining us in person, and for those via live stream today, to this evening, thank you for joining us. I will be your host for this program, and this year we are celebrating ICFRC 40th anniversary, so we have some great plans for this year, with a total of 4 events devoting to celebrating our supporters, our legacy in the community, and the bright future ahead for internationally focused programming. We hope you will check our website and sign up for our monthly newsletter, and follow us on social media to learn more about the exciting stuff happening this year as we celebrate our 40th anniversary. Today's program is part of our new 2023-2024 series, Global Connection Across Iowa, which is funded by Humanities Iowa in the National Endowment for the Humanities. We will ask 2 things from you. First, there are paper copies of the Humanities Iowa sign-up form. It would be great if you could add your name and contact information to one of those. Secondly, after the program, there are paper copies of the Humanities Iowa program survey. It would be great if you would fill one out and leave it with us. ICFRC wants to acknowledge and thank its annual donors, sponsors, and partners for their support. This includes the Iowa Arts Council through the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, Humanities Iowa and the National Endowment for the Humanities, the University of Iowa International Programs, Honors Programs, and Public Policy Center. The Stanley UI Foundation support the organizations. Midwest One Bank, Taxes Plus, City Channel 4, for providing online access to ICFRC's programs along with the UI Library archives. The Iowa City Public Library for our new home, where we are hosting this event tonight. And last but certainly not least, the long-standing support from individuals who have helped our organization grow for 40 years. Many who are in the audience today. And thank you to you all. So ICFRC has adopted the Native American land acknowledgement prepared for the City of Iowa City ad hoc through Reconciliation Commission and Human Rights Commission. ICFRC recognizes that our home community of Iowa City now occupies the homelands of Native American nations to whom we owe our commitment and dedication. The full text of ICFRC acknowledgement is on our website. We invite you to check it out at icfrc.org. I would like to introduce to you today our speaker. As I said, Eyad came to Louisiana from Syria in August 2012 as a graduate student. He earned his Ph.D. in applied mathematics from Louisiana State in 2018. A husband and a father of 2. They all moved to Cedar Rapids, where he joined Mount Mercy University as an assistant professor of mathematics and statistics. He's now a software engineer at Collins Aerospace in Cedar Rapids. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Eyad Said, who will talk about surviving a dictator surviving.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. Especially thank you for having to listen to someone who is not an expert. I'm not a political scientist. My probably only expertise is that I come from the region that I intend to talk about. And as if to downsell my talk a little bit more, I do not claim to have any answers to the problems that I am going to show you. My hope is that maybe we can spark a conversation, not necessarily with me, maybe amongst yourselves, maybe with peers, maybe with experts. And hopefully one day we can tackle this big black hole that is taking place in Syria right now. One challenge that I had to overcome when deciding to give this talk is that although I have followed very closely what happened in Syria since 2011, having my family being still there, my dad, my mom, my sister and cousins, uncles and aunts, my wife's family is all there. Many things have happened. There was one kind of a mental block that I just couldn't overcome. There are so many atrocities that I witnessed, so many heartbreaks, so many shocks. And two, I didn't think everything is needed to just, let's say, guide us through the journey towards where I want to show at the very end. So I do not claim that this is an all-encompassing, talk about Syria, especially that I would like to skip a little bit forward until after Syria is no longer a breaking news hot topic. I am not a cable person. We were not a cable family. We don't have cable at home. We follow the news, I think, on internet, social media, but I don't think it's much different for people who actually follow the news on TV channels. Once a hot topic is no longer a hot topic, we maybe are tempted to think, oh, it must have gotten better, that they don't show it on the news anymore. Maybe it took care of itself. And I remember a conversation I had with Catherine, the previous executive director of ICFRC, when the Russian invasion to Ukraine happened. I told her, one thing that worries me about Ukraine is that the collective attention span is not that long. I witnessed it as a Syrian after 4 or 5 years. We kind of forgot that Syria was an issue. And it worried me that this might happen to Ukraine. And we've seen it, actually not just in Syria, we've seen it in other issues. There's always another thing happens, and then the previous issue is pushed to the backlog. So, is this thing? Yep, it's working. What happened since Syria stopped being a breaking news hot topic? I'll go over these points in a little further details, but just a quick overview. It looks like Assad is still in power. But really, is he? Is he still in power? Does he call the shots? Many sanctions, many embargoes, many boycotts, many acts and laws have been in effect to boycott either organization, individuals, government bodies in Syria. A huge portion, we'll talk about this in a minute, of the Syrian people are now under the poverty line. Millions of displaced refugees. We've all seen the heartbreaking images of refugees hopping on a small rubber boat trying to cross the Mediterranean or walking through the cold forests of Turkey to Greece to Europe. Syria right now is a divided country with wasted resources. And let's look at them one by one. Is Assad really still in power? Is he still calling the shots? I apologize, I didn't know how big or small the screen is, so if you can't really tell what the symbols are, no worries. It's very easy to identify them once you know what to look for. This is Syria right now. And the little dots that you will see on the map are, as you can tell at the top, military bases of different foreign countries in Syria. Maybe the easiest one to see right now are the yellow dots. These are from the Hezbollah militia from Lebanon. They work very closely with Iran. Speaking of, you might be able to see, I'm so sorry again, I didn't know that this will be blurry. The green, white, red flag of Iran, also distributed on mostly the west side of Syria and a little bit over here. We'll remember this part, by the way, because we'll talk more about it later. I think once a teacher, always a teacher. I'll try not to teach so much. And another one is the American flag, which is mostly in that yellow part. At the top, at the north, the red dots are Turkish military forces. These military forces have been described as the largest military presence in Syria, maybe ever. So when you look at this map, does it look like Assad is in power? With so many military posts, with a big, really big military presence in the area. Think about that as we go on. Like I said, many sanctions and boycotts to both government and individuals have been signed. One famous or infamous, depending how you want to call it, one that I guarantee that almost every Syrian know it by name is the Cedar Act. Maybe you heard about it, maybe not. It's named after an individual who had that code name, who leaked thousands of images that document the torture in Syrian prisons. Horrific images. Like I said, I witnessed a lot of atrocities, but I couldn't have the heart to, browse through more than a couple of images. They are, as far as I know, still on display in DC, I think in the Holocaust Museum, as far as I remember. This act in particular that was signed by previous President Trump in 2019 and I believe was in effect in 2020 is known for all Syrians for maybe the following effect. This is the exchange rate, Syrian pound to dollar. This is the beginning of the Syrian, I object to calling it civil war, but let's go with that since this is what looks like most of the political scientists call it. As you can see, it was increasing kind of steadily until this point, until the Cedar Act was in effect, and then it dramatically collapsed. Yeah, it's going up, but this is like really a collapse of the Syrian pound. And you can pause here for a second and think, what's the point of, and I'm not arguing for or against, I'm just putting a question over there for you to think of. What's the point of embargoes and boycotts? To me, again, I'm not a political scientist, so feel free to correct me, I'll happily stand corrected, is to kind of isolate a regime that we don't want the rest of the world to support. With less support, the regime, loses power and then eventually, hopefully, vanishes, steps away. One thing that definitely happened with the Cedar Act is it was much easier for the regime to pay its employees. Why? Every country, Syria is no different, doesn't only own its currency in its own currency. They own it in dollars, they own it in euros, they own it in other currencies. With the collapse of the Syrian pound, the regime is paying its employees in Syrian pound. What used to be, for example, $100 maybe dollars over here is now maybe $1. It's cheaper for the regime to pay its employees, its soldiers. So Think about that. Who really pays the price of embargoes? Not the regime, not Assad. We'll see later how Assad is able to survive. But one thing I can tell you from a personal experience, and again, I'm not saying I'm against these measures, is that everyone who used to be middle class is now poor. Everyone who used to be poor, I have no idea how they even survive. We'll touch base on that in a minute. The UN right now estimates that around 90% of the Syrian population is under the poverty line. Too many things going on here. You can focus on top right corner. Red bar, cost or average cost of living. Gray bar is minimum wage. How does anyone survive? What I have been told and what I have witnessed is that many survive by the help they get from their refugee member or family members that have made it elsewhere. Again, remember that exchange rate, that game of exchange rate. If a poor refugee sends $50, it is now worth something in Syria. And they can work with that for a couple of weeks at least. With being in poverty, if you can read Arabic, I didn't touch anything, I swear. Let's go back. If you can read Arabic, great. If not, this is what the middle sign, the center sign says. Hungry people cannot eat rocks. They eat their leaders. This is a recent demonstration in the southern part of Syria. It sounds bad, like what kind of a threat is that? But when the people are hungry, don't expect romantic solutions. Put things in, you probably have heard this analogy a lot, put things in a pressure cooker, and you can only expect something, bad to happen. The reason I'm putting this on the screen is that after clashes really intensified in Syria around 2013, 2014, demonstrations ceased to exist because who can go and demonstrate when there are bombs everywhere and there are clashes and fights? This is very scary to Assad right now. This is like another nightmare. This is 2011 happening all over again and pretty much from the same spot, southern Syria. Not the same governorate. It started in Daraa. This is Suwaida, a next governorate, but what I like to call it the southern nightmare of Assad. And the difference right now is that in 2011, Assad was able to immediately send troops and try to shut them off, the demonstrations. These have been going on for, I think, 3 or 4 months now. And Assad is helpless, powerless, to at least fight these demonstrators. I'll not put any heartbreaking images, I promise. You've all seen them. You know what I'm talking about. What I would like to show you, since, again, Syria is no longer on the news, and I really apologize, folks, once again. I had no idea this would look this blurry. A couple of graphs taken from the UN HCR. The first one shows the ranking of largest Syrian refugees in countries. And the first one on the list, the top one, is Turkey. Turkey right now hosts around 3.5 million Syrian refugees, followed by a big margin by Lebanon, then Jordan, Germany, Iraq, Egypt, and then the list goes on. The next one is the ranking of major source countries of refugees in general, as of 2022. And Syria is again top of the list, followed by Ukraine, and then very closely by Afghanistan. And the third one that I'd like to show, and I can share this later, I don't know if that's okay with you, Peter, so you can get a better view of it. Ranking of the largest refugee hosting countries out of, so all refugees, not just Syrian refugees, as of 2022. Turkey in first place, Germany, Pakistan, and then way down on the list over here is the US. One thing that caught my attention in the middle one, the ranking of the major source countries of refugees, is Sudan and South Sudan being on that list. But they also are on this list and that list. Let that sink in. A country that has its own issues, that its people are fleeing away as refugees, is hosting refugees. And right now, by the way, a quick disclaimer. I'm not yet a citizen. I am on a path to citizenship. So allow me if I say we liberally. I shouldn't. Maybe I should just say I'm a guest right now, but it should be a couple of years when I can officially say we. But we can do better than this. When countries that has its own issues are hosting refugees and we're not, I don't see the balance in there. Especially when you take into account size done, for example, compared to the US. One more time, I know I sound like a broken record. If I am mistaken in any of these points, please correct me. I am not an expert. I'm gonna recycle this for a quick, not a pop-up quiz, something to think about for 5 seconds. Remember when I said Iranians or Iranian forces are generally here? Russians are in the northwest, close to the Mediterranean. American forces are in that yellow region. Hezbollah are pretty much everywhere. However, they work closely with the Iranians, so you'll see them more over here. They are the yellow dots. Let me talk first about what resources Syria used to have. Maybe still currently has, depending on how you see things. Syria has oil, still has oil. It has gas and phosphate. It used to be kind of popular destination for tourism. Of course, that is gone now. And it has a good, let's say, candidates for ports on the Mediterranean. If you can see it from the back, on the Mediterranean, there is the Russian flag right now. That resource is now controlled by the Russians. This one dot in particular, this is a city called Tartus. The Russians have built a sizable base that wasn't there originally to control the port over there. Latakia, similarly, the one to the north, is surrounded by Russians. Quick question. Where do you think Syrian oil is? You don't have to answer out loud. Can you see how the two match? This line between yellow and purple is the exact same line between yellow and orange over there. See how we have American troops to the east and Russian and Hezbollah to the west? That's pretty much how they are divided. Most of Syrian oil is in this region and some in there. I recall a think it was 2018 or 2019. Oh, actually, let's go back a little bit further in time. When ISIS came to power, this is when the U.S. started sending military forces there, understandably. And close to the defeat of ISIS, I remember previous President Trump said something along the line of, "We now control the Syrian oil." Now, you can understand it in two ways. You can either understand it as ISIS no longer controls the oil. We do, the good guys. Or we, Americans, control the oil. Do I have an answer to that? I do not. The Syrian oil right now is a very big question mark. Remember the embargoes and boycotts? Many of these acts were directed towards the energy production sector of Syria. In other words, even if Assad can control or has control over the whole map, he cannot sell oil to anyone. So who controls the oil right now? There was news, I think Politico had a story in 2019 about a very small firm from Delaware called Delta Crescent, as far as I remember, that won the, what's the term I'm looking for? Deal, let's call it a deal. That won the deal to extract oil in the yellow region. And then in President Biden's time, told them that they can no longer work there, still gave them one after another extensions to get out of Syria. And I don't know if that happened to begin with. So that resource is mostly gone. Syrians do not benefit from their oil. They actually have to kind of purchase it. Right now, the Syrian regime purchases oil and gas from, can you guess? Russia and Iran. Because of the embargo, they cannot make business with, Europe. They cannot make business with the US. They purchase oil. When they have oil, they purchase oil from Iran and Russia, and gas. So that's the resources gone. Now that begs the question, how is Assad surviving all this? One thing that is working in his favor so far is the support from his allies. And I have, if I could add more quotation marks, I would, because it's not really support. We know that nothing is for free. They don't support him because they think he's good. They don't support him because they think he is, the answer to serious problems or to their own problems. They are supporting him because they are controlling the resources of the land. Russia has now control over the ports on the Mediterranean. They have secured, I believe, deals to run the ports for the next 49 years, which means even if Assad is gone tomorrow, they can still control the ports for the next 49 years. My understanding, and correct me if I am wrong in this, is that when governments make deals, they don't make them as, individuals. Assad did not sign the deal on his own behalf. He signed it as the president of the Syrian Republic. So even if another president comes tomorrow, that deal will still be in effect. So ports, next 49 years. Phosphate, I believe 70% is going to Russia officially, if not more, but the official deal is 70% for the next, I believe, 20 years. So it's not really support, it's a deal. Here is Assad speaking, here is our resources, keep me in power, keep me there, keep me benefiting. Now, benefiting from what exactly? We'll see in a second. So, just to kind of go over that support real quick. Since 2015, or on September 2015, Russia officially sent troops to Syria answering Assad's own request. He officially asked Russia for military support because he was losing power so badly. He was losing lands like crazy before 2015. But before that, as early as 2011, when the whole Syrian crisis started, sorry, excuse me, Iran has been sending thousands of volunteers trained by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and then made it into official soldiers to support Assad. Hezbollah since 2013. That's the military side. On the political side, so far, Russia has vetoed Security Council resolutions 17 times to prevent any intervention from others, no matter who they are in Syria. Of course, understandably, because they are benefiting from this, at least for the long term. There are talks that the Syrian debt right now to Iran only is around 10 times Syria's average annual budget, which is not a big number if you compare it to the US budget. But for a small country like Syria, I believe it's around 4 or 5 billions. 10 times that is a huge debt that no country can pay in cash, if you know what I mean. That's why Assad has been giving away gas, phosphate. What do you want? Control near the capital? By the way, that southern part where the Iranian flags were, this is where Damascus, the capital, is. You want control over the capital? Take it. Keep me on my throne. So, another question to think about. We have this president whose country has been destroyed for the past 12 years now, and whether you call it a civil war or a proxy war, revolution, whatever you want to call it, it's been going through this for the past 11, 12 years. It doesn't even control its own resources. It has to buy them from so-called allies. It has been hit by one after another of embargoes and boycotts. And its people are rapidly, very rapidly, going under the poverty line and growing angry and hopeless. What does this president do? A sensible one might say, well, you know, you won, I give up. But we're talking about a corrupt president and a war criminal. A war criminal that has a proven record of blood on his hands. And a corrupted guy that a great lady, Sarah Chase, a great speaker that ICFRC co-hosted, I believe, a year or a couple of years ago, described the corruption systems in countries like Syria and others as a vertical system. And let me take a minute to explain what that is. Corruption in Syria takes the following shape. You're driving your car peacefully. A traffic officer would stop you and tell you in no hidden terms that he will write you a ticket unless you pay him something. And usually you do, because what he's asking for is far less than the ticket and, you know, all the hassle of having to go. By the way, Syria is a third world country. It's not going to, you know, be solved online. You'll actually have to go to court and go through all, you know, the hassle, similar to, you know, our experience here in the DMV, but worse. And usually people do it. They would pay. The difference in that system of corruption is that that traffic officer would only keep a fraction of what you paid him in his pocket or her pocket and pay the rest to the higher-ups, who in turn would only keep a fraction and pay it to the higher-ups, and so on until you get to the close inner circle of Assad. Everything works that way in Syria. I kid you not. Everything. If you want to open a new business, you'll have to tip someone. If you want to get married, I kid you not, you'll have to go to the civil court and you have to tip someone. Everything you have to go through and deal with in Syria, you have to make plans for, a portion, some monetary amount that you'll have to pay up. And remember that all only goes upwards. So, someone like that, what would they do? Would they give up? No. The solution, if you already heard it on the news, I guess it's not very climatic now, but if you haven't, the solution is to turn the country into a narco state. Since around 2018, 2019, I don't know who came up with the brilliant idea, I don't know if it's Assad himself or someone else, to start mass producing a drug called Captagon. It's not very popular, thankfully, here, but it's very popular in the Middle East. It's in the amphetamine family. And sell it. Sell it to neighboring countries. Just in 2022, you read that number right, 40 tons, more than 200 million pills were seized. Not produced, seized. This is just the top of the iceberg. That 40 tons in 1 year is just the top of the iceberg. The net profit was estimated in 2021 to be around $5.7 to $6 billion. Remember, the annual or average annual budget of Syria is around that number. What does this sound like to you? This is a lifeline to Assad. Now, I'm not claiming that, I discovered this. This is kind of well established in, international community. They know about this, and there was at least one act, I believe called the Captagon Act, to at least name individuals around Assad who are implicit in this mass production. A couple of reports, one by the BBC and one by the New York Times, found out that it's definitely not an individual business, definitely not, regular folks, regular cartel who are doing this. This has been produced, overseen by no other than Assad's own younger brother, Maher. The BBC has a really great video report on that. They have found pill pressing machines in like little army posts. Why? Because remember what we talked about earlier at the exchange rate? What Assad is paying his now soldiers and employees is nothing. It's like $40 a month. They have to have a side hustle, so they agree to it. Yeah, let's press some pills. So we have the president's brother in on this. I think the New York Times ran a report that also connected Hezbollah to that business in distribution. Here is a visual. Hopefully this is a little better. Every bubble is a bust. The bigger the bust, bigger the bubble. There have been busts in neighboring countries, as you can tell, Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, where else? United Arab Emirates, and as far as Malaysia, Greece, Italy, some in Germany and France. Why and how? Remember, this drug is very popular in the region, in the Arabian Peninsula, mostly. So mostly in the Middle East. So why go further? Enhance the business? Not really. The neighboring countries have grown suspicious of anything that comes from Syria. Anything. So whoever is distributing is, in the office of distribution, thought, well, we'll send it to Europe first and then have that shipment change hands and send it back to the Arabian Peninsula. Maybe less suspicious. Look at the size of that bubble in Italy. It's bigger than maybe all the busts in northern Egypt combined. One thing that I really like, this is by the New York Times as well, by the way. One thing that I really like about this image, to me at least, it looks like cancer. Right? This kind of looks like the childish, at least, image in my mind of what cancer looks like, what the bad cells look like in the body, how they spread. Morally, I do not like to give reasons why we should do the right thing. Ideally, I would like us to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. End of story. There should be no, benefit or I'm slow today. Sorry. That's right. Thank you. An incentive for doing the right thing. But I understand in this time and the scale of the matter, we sometimes need something to motivate us to do the right thing. This is cancer. We're not talking about a small cartel here. This is really a big deal. When this is only what is seized, not what is produced. Nobody knows what is produced. When every small military post can press pills and distribute them, we're talking about something that really... Oh, by the way, something I forgot to mention, it's over here. It is now the country's most valuable export, far surpassing every legal product Syria can produce. Remember the number, 5.7 billion? It makes sense now. It is bringing more money than anything Assad can normally and legally do. So what embargoes? If I am Assad, I don't care about embargoes. They only affect my people. I don't care. I have shown once and again that I don't care for them. They're only there. I remember at the beginning of 2011, when demonstrations started to take place in Syria, some people said, well, at least we had security. And that was a very popular counter-argument in Syria at the time. At least we had security. Like, we can go around, we can travel, we can do anything, and there was no clashes. And my dad told me something. He said, that security was not intended for us. We are the sheep in their cattle. They are preventing wolves from eating us, not because they like us, because they are planning to eat us later. They want someone to consume their products. When Assad and his family, his cousins, his inner circle, literally controls around 60% of every business on Syria, they need customers. If customers cannot pay, there is no point of them controlling all that business. That security was not meant for us. That security was meant for them. So when I look at this map, it now takes what we have been dealing with to a larger scale. Now others are suffering because of, I think, Assad staying in power. I want to reiterate once again. Somebody might come and say, well, how do you remove Assad right now? I don't know. Will it produce a black hole similar to the one that happened when Saddam Hussein was removed? Yeah, it probably would. But I don't see any other solution. Like, no matter how you look at it, there will be a black hole. Let's do it now. Let's rip that Band-Aid and deal with the consequences. Keeping Assad in power will only make things worse. There's no way for it to become better. If, putting it mildly, some governments thought that having to deal with refugees is bad enough, I say this is worse. Thank you, and appreciate you being here.
Before we begin with questions, we want to thank our supporters once more time and donors for their support, in particular Humanities Iowa for today's program. If you would like to join ICFRC or make a gift to support our programs, please go to icfrc.org or check out one of the signs stationed in the room today, okay? Thank you again for your participation. All right, so questions. So who has questions for Eyad?
Very informative. It's very informative. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. Very informative presentation. So maybe two questions coming from a pedestrian that does not understand international affairs in the region. But with the Russia conflict in the Ukraine, is Iran escalating their support for Assad? Maybe that's question one. And then two, what is your understanding of the incentive for Saudi Arabia to support, essentially the counterforces? I asked that very...
No, these are great questions.
Yeah, thank you.
These are great questions. So after, and by the way, I am not an expert either, but this is what I understood from, observation. After the Russian-Ukrainian war, yes, Russia did withdraw parts of its military presence in Syria and kind of redistributed. Some of them went all the way back to Russia. Others were just, being redistributed to be maybe closer to go back if needed. And yes, in some parts there was an exchange of hands between Russia and Iran. Like, I'm taking off, you take it from here. That happened especially in the south, where the demonstrations right now are taking place. Iranians, I want to be very careful here when I say Russians, Iranians, I really mean the government and the armies, not the people. So forgive me if I sometimes misspoke. Some Syrians think this is actually a good chance for the international community to do something now that Russia is kind of busy with its own war. And Iran has been paying a hefty price to support Assad in the hope that what it controls from its resources is, gonna pay the bill later and balance the scale. That's my understanding. So yes, it is definitely affecting the distribution of power over there. But you'll see that Assad himself is outside of that equation. Like, nobody speaks of Assad or to Assad. These exchanges, I really mean it, they take place between these two factors. Like, sometimes there will be like international committees to talk about Syria, namely Russia, Iran, and Turkey. Nobody would even think of inviting Assad to talk about it. Like, they would sit around a round table and say, yeah, let's do this, let's do that. One of the things that, for example, Turkey has done without talking to Assad at all, I don't know if you can see it, that green part in the north, that is like a safe zone, a buffer zone that Turkey has suggested and implemented to keep its own border safe. Did anybody talk to Assad about this? No. Your second question, Saudi Arabia is, all right, this is a little touchy, so I'll again try to be super careful here. But this is not only my observation. I have met Saudi friends when I was back a graduate student in Louisiana, and they told me similar stories. At the beginning of the Syrian demonstrations, actually once there were fights and clashes in Syria, some Saudi sheikhs would go and say publicly, like, this is time for jihad. This is time to go support your Muslims brothers. Go fight for them. Go fight with them. And depending on how much you are familiar with the Saudi government, this is not something that you can say publicly in Saudi. I mean, we all have that image that, oh yeah, they support that. No, they don't. The government itself does not support that. However, they did the sneaky thing of allowing jihadists to go. Why? Because why not? Let them go. If they fight a war and won, great, we don't like Assad anyway. If they die there, it's another win for us. We got rid of jihadists on our land. They died elsewhere. In Syria, I have seen, well, not personally, but like in the news, I have seen jihadists coming from not only Saudi, but from other Muslim countries. It is touchy for me because although I'm not religious, but I still identify as a Muslim. I was raised as a Muslim, so it's a little touchy subject for me. But we have seen in Syria jihadists coming from Tunisia, from Algeria, from Libya, from Saudi, from Kuwait, from Afghanistan. And I guess the unspoken deal was, yeah, let them go. Let them go. Why keep them where they don't want to be? They go there, good for them. And eventually, most of them, if not all of them, were killed there. So that is one incentive. I guess the Gulf countries, they were, at least in the first 3 or 4 years, they were sincere about trying to help the Syrian people. They wanted to get rid of Assad. But when it got too messy, they kind of like, it's not worth it. And to me, this is even worse than not helping. There is a story that I keep referencing, and I'm not claiming any malicious intentions here, but very early in the demonstrations, the American ambassador in Syria went down and walked with the demonstrators. Now, maybe he participated out of the goodness of his heart. Maybe he thought like, this is a good cause, a just cause, I'm going with it. But what the people saw is the American ambassador walking with them. So what did they think? America's on our side. What did Bashar Assad do? Oh, it's the imperialist West fighting me. And he's still using that narrative until today. It is not a fight for freedom. This is not a fight for human rights. This is the imperialist West planning and conspiring against the stability of the region. So half-cooked plans usually backfire. They are worse than no plans at all or no action.
You mentioned how the money in Syria keeps going up and up the chain until it eventually reaches the top. What kind of keeps this system in place or forces people to keep sending the money up? Is it some sort of like fear of retaliation?
Yes, fear of retaliation, and I don't know how to say it other than when someone is born and raised within that system, they eventually accept it for what it is. Like, oh, this is fact of life. Especially if, like, they don't go out and they don't see how, other systems behave and work. Like, oh, yeah, this is how things work over here, right? You pay a small amount of money and eventually, you get things done. So why not? Which, if you understand it as I am putting part of the blame on my people, including myself, then yes, I think we are partially to blame for this. But there is retaliation, definitely. Like in the maybe traffic incident, the retaliation is, a citation. But in other situations, you don't get things done. Here is a funny short story. Do we have a couple of minutes? Back when I was in Syria, I met with a gal who worked with me, but she was an Assad supporter at that time, at least. I don't know if she changed her views. And the funny part is that she told me a story that an oil extraction company approached her dad. Her dad is like an expert in oil, who used to work in Gulf companies and then retired and went back to Syria, approached him asking, how do we get, paperwork, how do we get authorization to work in Syria? And he told them, well, it's a very simple thing to do. Go to Mahir, Assad's brother, iron it out with him, and you get things done. And they did. They went to talk to him. Remember, that gal, the Assad supporter, told me that story. And he asked for 50% of their benefits, 50% of their net profit. And they said, why? Like, what are you doing? The only thing you're contributing to is to give us your signature that we can work on Syria. And that is not even official because you are a military person. You're just letting others work with us. Why 50%? And he was like, this is the deal. Take it or leave it. And they didn't take it. So think of that as you put things into smaller perspectives. You don't get your things done, or you get fines against you. It was very easy in Syria to just write what we call a report to Syrian security officers. If like we get in a road rage incident, I'll look into your car plate number, and I will write something against you. Like, I heard him cursing Assad in public, or I heard him cursing the government, and yeah, you'll be taken. So you definitely need to get ready to pay. But yeah, it's a huge system. It's a big system. I think you have a couple. Oh.
Well, I think we are getting.
Sorry.
We're going to take a couple more questions, or?
I see a hand here.
See, there was one right there too. So it's two more, and then are we good? Okay, perfect.
I tend to go on tangents. I'm sorry. I apologize.
You're doing good. You're doing good. No.
I was just wondering if you could maybe explain a little bit more of like how their resources are controlled and how the U.S. might control one part of their oil, the Russia might control like a port. Like, what does that really do for like the country? Like briefly.
Yeah. So, like I said, the American control of oil is a really big mystery, and I did my research on it, so to speak, but I didn't get anywhere. All we know right now is that Assad himself does not get there. That part, the yellow part, where most of the oil fields are, is controlled by what is called the Democratic Syrian Forces. They are Kurds backed by the US. So Assad is definitely not getting that oil. Where does that oil go to? I really don't know. Similar thing over here, the couple of oil companies that are controlled by the Russians and the Iranians. Logically, after everything that Iran and Russia paid as military support and personnel and technology to keep Assad in power, they want something back. So to me, at least, it makes sense that, yeah, they are controlling that oil and they're taking it. What we see as after effects is that almost on a monthly cycle, every gas station in Syria will be out. And you'll have to wait a day or two to get your ratios. So it's definitely not going there to the Syrian people.
No, it was back there, the gentleman back there.
Okay, yeah. So my dad's from Syria, so I'm half Syrian, and I see you have the Syrian flag, and something that I don't know if you'll have like a good answer, if there is a good answer, but I'm wondering how to handle like having pride in my like Arab heritage and not wanting to come off as like an apologist for Assad either. So curious if you have any ideas.
Man, identity is such a hard question. It's something that we, run after our whole lives, and some of us get the answer, others don't. I'll tell you, I don't have an answer, but I'm dealing with a similar thing. My 10-year-old boy was born here in the States. And for whatever reason, he grew fond of Syria, although we try to limit what we tell them, himself and his sister, about Syria, because it's a long story of heartbreaks and, atrocities. But like, he wants me to speak Arabic in public. He doesn't want me to speak to him in English in front of others. He wants to go visit. He asked me, like, why don't we go during summers? like other, immigrant friends do. He wants to go there and see. And I'm really divided in between. Like, I want him to grow an American identity. Like, you grew up here, you went to schools here, your friends are U.S. citizens. Why do you want that part of you? And then another part of me says, well, I know if I deprive him from that part of his identity, when he grows up, it will feel like, something is missing. I don't quite understand your statement about being an Assad apologist or having pride in Syria. To me, they are, unrelated. You can be proud of your Syrian heritage or your Arab heritage without being apologist for Assad. Assad, to me, as I grew up in Syria, uses all of these big words only to his benefits. Like, he would go and say, we are Arabs, and we are this and that, and we defend the Palestinian cause, and we are brothers. But in fact, all he cares about is himself. I think we should reclaim these big words. Like, if you want to be proud of your heritage, be proud of your heritage, man. And just don't care for what that person is. At the end of the day, really, he will die. His heritage will be of blood and torture and corruption, as far as I know. And maybe one day we will heal, hopefully. I know if that's a good answer.
That's like the
Last question.
The last question. Yeah.
All right, I guess I was just curious, what were the quickest or largest policy changes that Bashar made, following his father's reign, that caused this big spike in conflict over in the 21st century?
Really good question. Thank you. As far as I remember, I think the shift to what is called in economics. Man, I'll have to squeeze my memory to get it. But let's until I remember the term. It's a shift in economic policy to make it a little bit more free and uncontrolled. That.
They were socialist primarily.
It used to be heavily socialist during his dad's reign. With him, he tried to, be lax on socialism and give it more like free market. Free market, I think, is the term that I was looking for. This would work in a country with less corruption, at least. Like, there's no corruption-free countries, I guess. But not with a country that is heavily corrupted like Syria. No businesses would like to come. Like, if you're an investor, you wouldn't want to come to Syria with that level of corruption, where you have to pay 40% or 50% to Assad's inner family to have a business. Like, why bother? There are nearby countries that will welcome you. So, to me, at least as a non-expert, that was the tipping point. Everything went downhill from there.
All right, this wrap up the series of Q&A. Let's give it up for our program speaker, Eyad Said. Thank you so much. And this was ICFRC's 10th program of the fall. Our next program features Vice Admiral and 2022 Iowa candidate for governor, Mike Franken, Iowa Senator Rob Hawk, and UI Professor Sarah Mitchell in a moderated panel conversation with Jessica Ilielmo from the American Security Project, a think tank in D.C., speaking out. They're going to speak about climate security as national security, climate change, and the Hawkeye State. Join us for that program. It's from 5:30 to 6:30 on Tuesday, the 14th of November, in the UI Old Capitol Museum Senate Chamber, where the panel will discuss the profound consequences for national security, the military, and international relations. Okay? With that, thank you again for joining us. We are adjourned.